The Lone Guardian. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the massive Exarathi invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 50,000 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, stretched across space like a dark plague of metal and malice. Their hulls gleamed with the dull shine of quantum steel, and their weapons arrays could level entire planets with ease. Admiral Kexpor stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms folded behind his back as he gazed at the blue-green world that hung like a jewel in the distance. Earth, the homeworld of the species that had dared to spread across the galaxy without permission from the Exarathi Empire. For 2 centuries, humans had been colonizing worlds, building space stations, and trading with other species as if they belonged among the stars. That presumption would end today. Across the galaxy, representatives from dozens of civilized worlds watched through quantum scanners and long-range sensors. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session when the Exarathi fleet was first detected. Everyone knew what was coming. The humans had built a respectable navy over the past century, with nearly 3,000 ships scattered across their colonial territories. Surely they would recall their entire fleet to defend their homeworld. The battle would be fierce, costly, and would determine humanity's place in the cosmic order once and for all. But something was wrong. As the hours passed and the Exarathi fleet took up attack formations, only one human ship appeared to challenge them. A single vessel, sleek and white, emerged from behind Earth's moon and accelerated toward the invasion force. It was perhaps 300 meters long, smaller than most Exarathi escort frigates, with smooth curves that made it look more like a work of art than a weapon of war. On the bridge of the human vessel, Defiant Dawn, Captain Elena Vasquez sat calmly in her command chair, her dark eyes focused on the tactical display showing 50,000 enemy contacts. She was a woman in her early 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and hands that bore the calluses of someone who had worked her way up through the ranks. Her crew was equally unremarkable by galactic standards. 12 specialists, each one human, each one ordinary by the measure of other species. Dr. James Chen, the ship's science officer, ran his fingers over quantum equations that would have baffled the greatest Exarathi minds. His teammate Sarah Kim monitored power distribution systems that somehow converted solar radiation into usable energy with perfect efficiency. Navigator Paulo Santos calculated trajectories using mathematics that treated space and time as suggestions rather than laws. Each crew member represented humanity's greatest achievements in their respective fields, but none of them possessed the psychic powers, enhanced genetics, or technological augmentations common among other galactic species. The Exarathi communications array crackled to life, and Admiral Kexpor's harsh voice filled every ship in the system. Humans of Earth, you will surrender immediately. Your pathetic single ship cannot stand against the might of the Exarathi Empire. Recall your fleet and submit to Imperial authority, or we will reduce your world to ash. Captain Vasquez activated her own communication system, her voice calm and steady as it reached every vessel in the solar system. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth defense ship Defiant Dawn. We acknowledge your presence, Admiral Kexfor. However, we must respectfully decline your offer of surrender. This system is under the protection of humanity, and we will defend it. The silence that followed was profound. Across the galaxy, alien observers struggled to understand what they had just witnessed. Where was the human fleet? Where were the thousands of ships that should be racing to Earth's defense? Why had humanity sent only one vessel against an enemy force that could conquer entire star systems? On the Exarathi flagship, Admiral Kexfor's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered laughter. You amuse me, human. Very well. We shall demonstrate the price of defiance. He turned to his weapons officer. Send the 5th attack squadron. Destroy that ship quickly so we can proceed with the invasion. 200 Exarathi fighters launched from their carriers, each one armed with plasma cannons capable of melting through the armor of most galactic warships. They swept toward the defiant dawn in perfect formation, their pilots confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. The human ship appeared to be drifting motionless in space, making no attempt to flee or call for reinforcements. But as the Exorethi fighters closed to weapons range, something impossible happened. The defiant dawn simply wasn't where their targeting computers said it should be. One moment it hung in space directly ahead of them. The next it had somehow shifted 3 kilometers to port without any visible acceleration. Plasma bolts that should have struck the hull instead blazed harmlessly past empty space. Fighter Commander Gixtal snarled into his communications array. Spread attack formation. The humans have some kind of stealth technology. But even as his pilots adjusted their approach, the human ship continued to dance between their attacks with movements that defied physics. It accelerated without engine burn, turned without momentum transfer, and seemed to predict their targeting solutions before they were even calculated. Then the defiant dawn fired back. The weapons that emerged from the human ship were unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, they launched what appeared to be pure light, brilliant white streams that moved faster than conventional sensors could track. When these beams struck the Exorethi fighters, they didn't explode or burn. Instead, they simply stopped working. Systems shut down, engines went dead, and life support switched to emergency power. The pilots found themselves drifting helplessly in space, their ships completely disabled but undamaged. Within 10 minutes, all 200 fighters were floating dead in space, their crews alive but helpless. The human ship had not destroyed a single enemy vessel, yet the entire squadron was neutralized. This was precision beyond anything that Exorethi had ever encountered. Aboard the Defiant Dawn, Dr. Chen monitored the quantum resonance patterns that made their impossible maneuvers possible. Harmonic alignment holding steady, Captain. The field generators are operating within normal parameters. Excellent, Captain Vasquez replied. She turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Rodriguez, please transmit recovery coordinates to the disabled Exorethi pilots. Standard humanitarian protocols. Navigator Santos looked up from his console with a slight smile. Admiral Kexivor is requesting immediate conference, Captain. His voice patterns suggest considerable agitation. The tactical display showed the main Exorethi fleet beginning to move, their massive ships advancing in battle formation toward the lone human vessel. Captain Vasquez studied the patterns, noting how the enemy commanders were positioning their forces for a coordinated assault. They had learned from the failure of their fighters and were preparing to attack with overwhelming firepower from multiple directions simultaneously. Dr. Chen, prepare for full harmonic synchronization, she ordered. All stations, initiate consciousness link protocols. Around the bridge, each crew member placed their hand on crystalline interfaces built into their workstations. The crystals began to glow with soft blue light as quantum fields aligned their neural patterns. What happened next was humanity's greatest secret, the technology that had taken them 2 centuries to develop and another 50 years to perfect. The Harmony Drive didn't just connect the crew members to each other. It merged their consciousness into a single unified entity while preserving their individual skills and knowledge. 12 minds became one mind. 12 sets of hands became extensions of a single will, and 12 areas of expertise combined into perfect coordination. The ship itself became part of this unified consciousness, its sensors extending their perception and its systems responding to thought rather than command. Through the quantum field that surrounded their vessel, they could sense the approaching Exorethi fleet like distant thunder. 50,000 ships, each one carrying hundreds of crew members, all focused on a single goal, the destruction of humanity's lone guardian. The weight of that hostile intention pressed against their shared consciousness like a physical force. But the 12 who had become one felt no fear. They had trained for this moment, prepared for this responsibility, and accepted the burden of standing between Earth and extinction. As the Exorethi fleet closed to weapons range, their unified consciousness reached out through space itself, touching the quantum foundations of reality with thoughts that moved faster than light. The first salvo from the Exarathi armada lit up the void like a miniature star. Thousands of energy beams, plasma bolts, and kinetic projectiles converged on the position where their sensors indicated the human ship should be. The combined firepower could have shattered moons and boiled oceans, but when the light faded and the sensor screens cleared, the defiant Dawn remained untouched, hanging in space exactly where it had been moments before. The attack had passed through the ship, as if it didn't exist. Admiral Kexvor stood frozen on his command bridge, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Around him, his officers frantically checked their instruments and recalibrated their weapon systems. How was such a thing possible? No known technology could allow a ship to become intangible while maintaining its physical presence. The laws of physics simply didn't permit such impossibilities. But the humans had discovered something that the Exarathi Empire, for all its power and technology, had never understood. They had learned that consciousness itself was a fundamental force of the universe, and that minds working in perfect harmony could achieve what no individual intelligence could accomplish alone. The harmony drive didn't violate the laws of physics. It transcended them. As news of the impossible battle spread across the galaxy, alien observers struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. The human ship wasn't just surviving against overwhelming odds. It was demonstrating capabilities that challenged every assumption about the nature of space, time, and matter itself. Religious leaders among several species declared it a miracle. Scientists demanded explanations that their theories couldn't provide. Military commanders realized that everything they thought they knew about warfare had just become obsolete. On Earth, billions of people watched the battle through their communication networks, seeing their lone defender face an enemy that should have been unbeatable. Parents held their children close, lovers whispered prayers to whatever gods they believed in, and soldiers who had expected to die defending their homeworld instead found themselves witnessing something that defied all expectations. The defiant Dawn had become more than a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's refusal to surrender, a declaration that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the odds. As the Exarathi fleet regrouped for another assault, the 12 minds that had become one prepared to show the galaxy what human determination truly meant. The power of unity. The second wave of the Exarathi assault came with the fury of a collapsing star. Admiral Kexvor had committed his entire fleet to a coordinated bombardment that would saturate the space around the human ship with so much destructive energy that even their impossible technology couldn't protect them. Every weapon on every ship fired simultaneously, creating a storm of violence that turned the vacuum of space into a hellish cauldron of plasma and radiation. But the defiant Dawn danced through the chaos like light itself, following trajectories that existed in dimensions that Exarathi couldn't perceive. The unified consciousness that controlled the ship experienced the battle not as 12 separate individuals struggling to coordinate their actions, but as a single entity with perfect awareness of every threat and every opportunity. They moved through space as naturally as a bird moved through air, their understanding of physics transcending the crude mathematics that bound other species to linear thinking. Dr. Chen's expertise in quantum mechanics merged seamlessly with Navigator Santo's understanding of space-time geometry. Engineer Kim's knowledge of power systems combined with Pilot Jackson's intuitive grasp of movement and acceleration. The barriers between their minds had dissolved completely, creating something new and unprecedented in galactic history. They had achieved what philosophers and mystics had dreamed of for millennia: true unity of consciousness. Through their shared awareness, they could sense the growing frustration and fear aboard the Exarathi ships. The enemy commanders were beings accustomed to power, creatures who had conquered hundreds of worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. But now they faced an opponent that seemed to exist beyond the reach of conventional weapons, and their certainty was cracking like glass under pressure. Emperor Vextar himself materialized on the bridge of the flagship, his massive form towering over Admiral Kexvor. The Emperor was ancient even by Exarathi standards, his carapace scarred by countless battles, and his 4 arms enhanced with cybernetic weapons that had torn apart the defenders of entire star systems. He had personally led the conquest of 47 civilizations, and his name was spoken in whispers across half the galaxy. "Explain this humiliation," the Emperor growled, his voice like grinding stone. "How does a single primitive vessel stand against the mightiest fleet in galactic history?" Admiral Kexvor's mandibles clicked nervously. "Your Excellence, their technology appears to be based on principles we do not understand. Our weapons pass through their ship as if it were made of light itself. Our scientists believe they may have discovered how to manipulate the quantum substrate of reality." "Impossible," the Emperor snarled. "No species has ever achieved such mastery. The humans are barely 200 years into space travel. They lack the psychic abilities of the Zephyrians, the genetic modifications of the Helix Consortium, the technological heritage of the Builder Collective. They are ordinary creatures with ordinary minds." But even as he spoke, Emperor Vextar found himself studying the tactical display with growing unease. The human ship wasn't just avoiding their attacks, it was actively predicting them, moving to counter their strategies before the Exarathi commanders had even finished formulating their plans. This suggested a level of tactical awareness that transcended normal intelligence, as if the enemy could somehow perceive their thoughts directly. Aboard the Defiant Dawn, the unified consciousness that had once been 12 separate humans experienced the Emperor's confusion as clearly as if he had spoken aloud. Through the quantum fields that connected all matter at the fundamental level, they could sense the patterns of thought and emotion rippling through the Exarathi fleet. Fear was spreading like a virus through the enemy ranks as soldiers who had never known defeat began to question their own invincibility. Captain Vasquez's personality remained dominant within the unified consciousness, her experience and judgment guiding their collective decisions. Through her awareness, the others could feel her deep sadness at the necessity of this conflict. She had studied Exarathi culture during her years at the Academy, and she understood that their aggression came from a fundamental misunderstanding of what strength truly meant. The Exarathi measured power in terms of individual capability. Their greatest warriors were those who could defeat any opponent in single combat. Their most respected leaders were those who could impose their will on others through force of personality or superior weaponry. Their entire civilization was built on the concept that might made right, and that the strong had not only the right but the duty to dominate the weak. But humanity had learned a different lesson during their short journey to the stars. They had discovered that their greatest strength came not from individual excellence, but from their ability to work together, to combine their diverse talents and perspectives into something greater than the sum of its parts. The Harmony Drive was the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a technology that could only function when operated by minds that trusted each other completely. As the battle continued, the differences between these two approaches to power became increasingly clear. The Exarathi fleet, for all its size and technological sophistication, was fundamentally limited by the fact that each ship operated independently. Their commanders could coordinate their attacks, but they could not truly merge their consciousness the way the human crew had done. Each Exarathi warrior fought as an individual, bound by the limitations of a single perspective and a single set of reflexes. The Defiant Dawn, by contrast, fought as a unified entity. When Weapons Officer Martinez identified a weakness in the enemy formation, Navigation Officer Santos immediately calculated the optimal approach vector, while Engineer Kim rerouted power to the appropriate systems. There was no delay for communication, no time wasted on coordination. Thought became action with the speed of quantum entanglement. This advantage became even more pronounced when the human ship began its counterattack. Instead of the broad, devastating weapons favored by most galactic militaries, the Defiant Dawn employed surgical precision strikes that targeted the specific systems needed to disable enemy vessels without causing unnecessary casualties. Their white light beams could penetrate any known shielding and selectively shut down engines, weapons, or life support systems depending on the tactical situation. Emperor Vextar watched in growing amazement as ship after ship in his fleet fell silent, their crews unharmed but their vessels completely paralyzed. This was warfare unlike anything he had ever witnessed. The humans weren't trying to destroy their enemies. They were trying to save them from themselves. "They fight without hatred," he murmured, his voice filled with wonder. "They disable our ships but preserve our lives. What manner of species shows mercy to those who would destroy them?" The answer came to him gradually as he observed the human ship's behavior patterns. Every action the defiant Dawn took seemed designed to minimize casualties while maximizing tactical effectiveness. When Xerathi escape pods ejected from disabled ships, the human vessel actually altered its course to ensure the pods wouldn't be caught in crossfire. When a damaged Xerathi cruiser began venting atmosphere, the human ship transmitted emergency repair procedures to help the enemy crews save themselves. This was a concept that the Xerathi Empire had never encountered. An opponent who fought not from a desire to dominate, but from a need to protect. The humans weren't trying to prove their superiority. They were trying to preserve life itself, even the lives of those who threatened them. As the tactical situation became increasingly hopeless for the Xerathi, Emperor Vextar made a decision that shocked his own commanders. He ordered the fleet to cease fire and transmitted a message directly to the human vessel. Captain of the human ship, his voice carried across space with the weight of absolute authority. "I am Emperor Vextar of the Xerathi Empire. I demand to know how you have achieved such impossible capabilities. What technology allows a single vessel to stand against my entire fleet?" The response came in Captain Vasquez's calm, measured voice, though it carried undertones that suggested multiple personalities speaking in perfect harmony. "Emperor Vextar, we greet you with respect despite the circumstances. Our capabilities come not from superior technology, but from superior cooperation. We have learned to merge our consciousness into a unified whole while preserving our individual strengths. What you see as impossible is simply the result of minds working in perfect harmony." "Impossible," the Emperor growled. "No species has ever achieved true consciousness merger. The theoretical requirements alone would require absolute trust." Captain Vasquez interrupted gently. "The willingness to surrender individual ego for the greater good. The ability to see through another's eyes, think with another's mind, and act for another's benefit as readily as for one's own. These are the qualities that make consciousness merger possible, Emperor Vextar. They cannot be imposed by force or achieved through technology alone." The Emperor fell silent, his ancient mind grappling with concepts that challenged everything he had believed about power and strength. Around him, his officers watched in stunned silence as their leader struggled to comprehend a form of warfare that transcended individual capability. The breakthrough came when Emperor Vextar finally understood what he was truly facing. The human ship wasn't operated by a crew of 12 individuals. It was operated by a single consciousness that happened to exist in 12 bodies, supported by technology that treated matter and energy as extensions of will rather than obstacles to be overcome. This was evolution beyond anything that Xerathi had imagined possible. "You have shown us a form of strength we did not know existed," the Emperor said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. "We came here expecting to face warriors like ourselves, beings who fight as individuals for individual glory. Instead, we have encountered something unprecedented in galactic history. You fight as one, think as one, and sacrifice as one for the protection of others." The response came with what the Emperor could only describe as warmth, despite being transmitted across the cold vacuum of space. "We fight as humans, Emperor Vextar. This is what our species has always done when faced with impossible odds. We stand together, work together, and face whatever comes together. We invite you and your people to do the same." As the Xerathi fleet began its withdrawal from the solar system, Emperor Vextar found himself contemplating possibilities he had never considered before. Perhaps strength didn't have to come from domination. Perhaps the greatest power in the universe was the power to unite rather than divide, to build rather than destroy, to protect rather than conquer. The galaxy watched in amazement as the mightiest military force in known space retreated before a single human vessel. But those who understood what had truly happened that day realized they had witnessed something far more significant than a military victory. They had seen the birth of a new form of consciousness, a new way of being that transcended the limitations of individual existence. Humanity had answered the universe's greatest army with a single ship, but that ship had carried within it the combined will, wisdom, and determination of an entire species. In showing the galaxy what unity could accomplish, they had changed the course of history itself. The stars themselves seemed brighter as the defiant dawn turned toward home, its crew still linked in perfect harmony. Their consciousness expanded to embrace not just each other, but the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together.